All right, we're going to dig into a really critical financial issue today. It's something that could be costing service members thousands of dollars, and it's called the W-2 combat pay error. We're going to break down exactly how this happens, why it's a systemic problem, and most importantly, how you can get that money, your money, back in your pocket. Let's get right into it. So let's just start with a really direct question. Is the government illegally taxing your combat pay? Now, that sounds extreme, but for thousands of service members, the answer is unfortunately yes. This isn't because of some new tax law. It's happening because of a really stubborn bureaucratic error that takes your tax-free combat pay and reports it as taxable income. The result? You end up overpaying your taxes. So what is this error exactly? Well, it's really important to understand that this isn't a mistake you made. This is a system failure. The Defense Finance and Accounting Service, DFAS, is generating the wrong source document, your W-2. And that one single error creates a ripple effect, messing with everything from your tax refund all the way to student aid applications.
Okay, so to get this fixed, you first have to understand the law that's on your side. We're not talking about a loophole or some kind of special benefit here. This is your statutory right, and it's written directly into the U.S. tax code.
Here it is. This is the bedrock. Internal Revenue Code Section 112. This is the law that very clearly states that the money you earn in a combat zone is excluded from your gross income. It's a mandate, not a suggestion. But of course, this is where it starts to get a little complicated, because the law actually creates two different rules.
Right, so the law basically splits things in two. For enlisted personnel and for warrant officers, the rule is really simple. If you serve just 1 day in a combat zone during a given month, your entire military pay for that whole month is exempt from federal income tax. For commissioned officers, though, it's different. There's a cap.
And for the 2025 tax year, that specific cap for officers is $10,983 per month. Now, that number isn't just pulled out of thin air. It's calculated by taking the highest rate of enlisted base pay and adding the standard imminent danger pay. So any income an officer earns above that amount in a qualifying month is still taxable. And you guessed it, this distinction is a huge source of these errors. So where does this all apply? Well, it's not just what you might think of as an active war zone. The rule covers 4 main categories: official combat zones, qualified hazardous duty areas, and even hospitalization for combat injuries. But look at that third one, direct support areas. This is a big one. A huge number of W-2 errors come from service in these support areas because the paperwork trail can get pretty complicated. Okay, now that we know the law, let's look at why this error keeps happening over and over again. It's usually not malicious. It's what happens when these massive, clunky government systems just don't talk to each other correctly. It really boils down to 2 main failures. First, there's system latency. Your personnel record, the one that says you're in a combat zone, can take weeks to update. By the time it does, the payroll system has already run and incorrectly taxed your pay. Second, and this is a huge one for aircrew and anyone on TDY, the whole thing relies on manual triggers, like a travel voucher. If that DD Form 1351-2 gets lost, or it's delayed or filled out wrong, the pay system never gets the signal to make your pay tax-free.
And this right here, this gets to the real design flaw of the whole system. Think about it. The pay system's default setting is taxable. It needs a specific, timely action to flip the switch to tax-exempt. That means a simple slip-up, a lost form, a data lag, turns into an official government document, your W-2, that says you owe taxes on money that should have been yours, completely tax-free.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem and why it happens. Now let's talk about the fix. And the first, most critical step has nothing to do with the IRS. It's all about correcting that source document with DFAS. Listen up, because this is probably the single most important rule in this whole process. You cannot, I repeat, cannot just change the numbers on your tax return to what they should have been. The IRS computers are designed to match what you file with the W-2 they got from DFAS. If those numbers don't match, you're just begging for an audit. The only correct way to do this is to get DFAS to issue a Form W-2C, which is a corrected W-2. For most of you, this whole process is going to start at the AskDFAS web portal. It's basically a digital help desk. You'll log in, create a new ticket specifically for a W-2C, write a really clear explanation of what went wrong, and, this is the key, you have to attach your proof. So what kind of proof are we talking about? Well, the burden is on you. You need to provide things like your travel vouchers, your certified orders, or maybe a signed memo from your command that confirms your dates of service. And your explanation can't be vague. You have to be incredibly specific. Tell them the tax year, the exact dollar amount that's wrong, the dates you were in the zone, and exactly what you want them to do.
Now, you absolutely need to pay close attention right here, because this is where a lot of people mess up. The process is not the same for every service. If you get this wrong, your request could just disappear into a bureaucratic black hole. If you're Air Force or Space Force, you use MyFSS, not AskDFAS. Navy, you go through the My Navy Career Center. The Marine Corps has its own special queue inside of AskDFAS. It's only the Army and the Reserves that use the general portal. Getting this right is absolutely critical to getting it fixed.
All right, so you've navigated your service's specific bureaucracy, you've fought the good fight, and now you have that corrected W-2C in your hands. Awesome. Now it's time for the final stage, going to the IRS to actually get your refund. Let's quickly break down what this W-2C is telling you. Box 1, your taxable wages, is going to be lower. That's the whole point. Then you'll see a new entry in Box 12 with the code Q, showing the amount of your non-taxable combat pay. But notice what doesn't change. Boxes 3 and 5 for Social Security and Medicare. That's because combat pay is exempt from income tax, but not from FICA taxes. So the refund you get is for your federal income tax only. So with your W-2C, you're now ready to file Form 1040X. That's the amended tax return. You'll use the new correct numbers to lower your adjusted gross income, which means you'll have a lower tax bill. And doing this opens up a really important strategic decision you get to make about a major tax credit. We're talking about the Earned Income Tax Credit, or EITC. It is one of the most valuable credits out there, and service members get a special choice. You can actually elect to count your non-taxable combat pay when you're calculating this credit, or you can choose not to. So how do you decide? Well, think of the EITC like a bell curve. For a junior enlisted person with lower income, adding that combat pay can actually push them up the curve and get them a bigger credit. But for a senior NCO or an officer, adding that same pay could push their income too high and phase them out of the credit completely. The bottom line is you have to run the numbers both ways and pick whichever option gives you a bigger refund. But what if you're just now realizing this error happened years ago? Normally, you only have 3 years to claim a refund. But here's another powerful rule for service members. Under Internal Revenue Code Section 7508, your deadline gets automatically extended for the entire time you were in the combat zone, plus another 180 days after you leave. This is huge. It means you might be able to go back and fix errors from deployments that happened many, many years ago. Getting your W-2 fixed is the main event for sure, but the impact of this error doesn't stop there. Once you have the right paperwork, you need to shift your mindset from being a victim of the system to being your own auditor and check on a few other things. Here are 3 quick but critical final checks. First, your TSP. Tax-exempt combat pay actually allows for higher contribution limits, so make sure that's all categorized correctly. Second, the FAFSA for student aid. You have to report your non-taxable combat pay as untaxed income. You can't just lower your AGI and not report it. And finally, check your state taxes. If you got a federal refund, there is a very good chance your state owes you money too. So when it all comes down to it, here's the biggest takeaway. Your W-2 is not a final decree from the government. It's a report, and that report can be wrong. With everything we've talked about, you now have the knowledge and the power to check it, to challenge it, and to make sure you are not paying a single dollar more in tax than you legally owe. The only question left is, are you ready to audit yours?